is high for the impact of with Carinder. And yeah, anyway, what is high for the impact of with Carinder, Northern, and we have got Kurt at the back row. You want to say hello, Kurt?
Hello, everybody. I'm Kurt Roskoff. I'm with the Disability Channel. We're all about showcasing abilities, and it's our pleasure to be a guest here at the Impact Show by Carinder. Thank you, Carinder, for doing this. This is fun.
No worries. So, I think it's really channel we encourage you guys to use your disability and we encourage you to know what your disability is. So, how to become an influencer? People like me, how to become one. Well, that many followers on your social media, that many different types of followers. You know, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, like, make sure you have many followers. And if you got many followers, sign up to become an influencer. So, well, a question for you. What is disability can help with people? Like, what do you think that the disability will help, what impact with people who are disabled and who not using?
So your question is like about defining disability
Yeah,
and then
well, I don't know if it's me, but each person, yeah, any that, so it's only me. So you'll be back, what happened?
for some reason my Zoom screen went ahead and reloaded. So and I noticed that my live streaming was kind of getting flowing, like on my browser it was finally coming through. So my
Oh,
system is just kind of going. But your question was about, defining disability and about people with disabilities being left to do nothing, and kind of, what do I think about that
yeah,
people with disabilities are left to not participate as much as people who don't have a disability? Is that kind of the realm?
yeah,
So we talked about this in a previous conversation when we were on with Denise Vargas of Live Creatively with her Clubhouse session. And I spoke to the idea of biases and bias pathways, and that, yes, this is an issue that people with disabilities are left to a different path in life by design. We call it systemic oppression. And so when 3 out of 4 people in the world, so 7.8 billion people in the world. So I talk about how 2 billion people in the world are driven a different life than the other 5.8 billion people. So that's the task at hand, is to unify the gap between the billions, the 5.8 billion and the 2 billion and to unify them, that we can have unified activities, unified faith space, unified volunteer opportunities, that people with disabilities volunteer too, and lifelong learning opportunities, that anytime we're doing skill sharing or having education, that people with disabilities have their viable place by design, and it's in this realm of self-determination. So it's not the 5.8 billion people say, oh, that's what you want, this is how we'll do it. No, it's, oh, this is what you want. Okay, tell me more. Tell me more about how this is going to work. Because that's where I learned about global public inclusive infrastructure, universal design, web content accessibility guidelines, and this product of decades and centuries that has been ready to go, but the falsely claimed mainstream hasn't been deciding and hasn't been acting upon any decision to engage with people with disabilities. By and large, obviously there's a lot of victories, but that's where I say, if you Google people with disabilities, Google will return stats that come forth as about 1 billion people on earth being people with a disability. I believe that the number is double that, because it's limited to our technology. It's limited to our availability to take a census across the 7.8 billion people. And it's driven by different definitions of disability. In some respects, we can take a worldview that the entire population, 7.8 billion people on planet Earth, that we all have a disability with mortality, and just everybody's got a physical limitation. Everyone has a mental limitation. Everyone, so we're not immortal. So we could say the difference between immortality and mortality is a disability. So this is where it gets down to just respect for every person. I was talking about our friend Ed Cincinnati. He has a business called Dream Vacations. And when we talk about the cruises that he's able to get us on, we talk about that they count people, but they report it as souls. So how many souls on board? So I think that's interesting, that it's not just looking at it that we have 7.8 billion people on Earth. We have 7.8 billion souls. And when we talk about connecting from one soul to another, everybody's equal. Nobody's soul is superior to another person's soul. So what do you think about that thought, Carinder?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like hard because you don't know what it is, who it's from, and maybe someone else, you might not know. So I understand what you are saying, but it's like saying to the government, we need more disability rights. Now, in my experience, I don't know about yours, but in my experience, we do not have any disability rights, and I don't know about you, Pat, but we need more calculation on disability. What do you think about that one? What is your thought?
So were you saying that nobody has a disability? Was that part of what you were saying?
No, I say that for my experience, I, I think that we don't have any disability rights as a disability people. We don't have any disability rights, and it's not fair for people do not have disabilities have right, but people with disabilities don't have any right at all. So I wonder what your thought on that.
So we're speaking to, like I called it systemic oppression. So you're saying that in terms of money and resources, and for a person to have what they need, that people with disabilities disproportionately have less than the counterparts for people with disabilities being people who don't have a disability. So you're kind of speaking to that money and other resources are provided in a biased way to privilege
Yeah,
going to people who don't have a disability.
yeah,
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And this is the need here is people have been working on this for, like I say, decades and centuries. So there is something that's going on towards that. But I talk about the 3%. So people always get hung up on being able to talk about 3% of the way that that we have progressed on this issue, and it's disarming because people aren't getting it, that it's not at the scale it needs to be. So I mean, the 3% is to give kudos for. There's a lot of people out there doing a lot of hard work to create that 3% of resources, filling that gap. But what I'm talking about is I provide that. My solution is we need to get that to be 33 times more than what it presently is. So when you look at people involved in face spaces, and you look at people can report that people with disabilities are involved in faith spaces, I say it's only a 33rd of the number of people with disabilities that it could be, ought to be, should be, and would be if we make this decision. And then when I talk about volunteerism, we can find a lot of volunteerism going on by people with disabilities, but it's only a 33rd of what it could be, not because of people with disabilities, but because people that don't have a disability aren't considering a person with a disability for a volunteer position. So if we can remove that, we would grow the number of volunteers with disabilities by 33 times what it is today. And when you look at when people sit in a room or on Zoom or consuming education, yes, people with disabilities show up, but it's only a 33rd of what it could be, not because of people with disabilities, but because of people that don't have a disability aren't realizing how much the educational format and the program and how it's exchanged is not as favorable as it needs to be for people with disabilities. So if we could make education completely designed for the disability community, we would have people with disabilities participating in 33 times more of the available educational opportunities on planet Earth. And in terms of government, when we look at parliament, when we look at royalty, when we look at, lawmakers and law enforcement, and we look at, people who rule London and make London what it is. Yeah, people with disabilities are involved, but I would say London only has a 33rd of the people with disabilities. The people from London that have disabilities could be involved 33 times more than what presently is taking place. And I believe that London and England and the UK and Great Britain and everything that is happening, and that's just an example for around the world. All around the world, we could have 33 times more participation by people with disability in government, and people with disabilities have always been there. So if people that don't have a disability open up the floodgates and let people with disabilities do what they've been wanting to do all along, being a part of the legislative process, the political process, the civic engagements, to hold positions of power and all of that, we'd be in a place of equity. And then we look at the professional realm. You and I met through the Happy Neighborhood Project, the happiest place on earth for business people. So Carinder, that's why I went to Edwin a year ago. A year ago, I went to Edwin and I said, Edwin, I want to not only be the happiest place on earth for business people, I want it to be the most inclusive place on earth for business people.
Yeah.
And he shares that he didn't need me to ask for that. He's been wanting that too.
Wow.
So when I proposed that I would help with HMP ability, we set forth to talk again in April. And then between April and May, we decided that we were going to launch HMP ability late June, which was in the neighborhood of when our Americans with Disabilities Act celebration is for the anniversary. July 26th is the anniversary day for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we had that celebration first, and then that following Thursday, the 28th of July of 2021, we launched HMP ability. And this is a statement by the Happy Neighborhood Project that when we look at, say, getting to 2,000 members of the co-op, we believe we should be at where 500 of our members of the co-op ought to be people with disabilities, but that's not the case. So that's what HMP ability is designed to do, is that as we soar to 10,000 people in the Happy Co-op, our objective by the end of the year is to have 2,500 people with disabilities as a member of the Happy Co-op. That's the business plan.
Yeah. And not just only that, we need to, like, when you can get some going, like, when you were talking about London, we need to get so that London people and the US can be involved. So when London and Wales or Scotland or whatever, we have been united. And there is like the people first. People first is very important because the South Africa that are there is more disabled people than anyone. So really, what I understand what you're saying, Pat, and that is a really good point. But you think we could like now take a break, and when we come back, we talk more. So Pat, read up the video of the HSB on my Facebook. Then when we take the break, we'll come back. Over you, Pat.
Okay, so you're proposing something for HMP. You started this with talking about, Wales and Scotland and stuff like that. So are you speaking in general to, reaching out to people with disabilities in these areas, or what are you proposing for HMP? It sounded like you were saying when we come back, but when we come back,
No, like if we take a break, right? I make a video on my Facebook So if you look at my video on my Facebook, if you bring that up, then 1 week, I'm taking this up for you. One minute, guys. Yeah, I just messaged you. Hey, I just
Okay,
messaged you.
so you're talking about taking a break right now. You're gonna pull up a video and then we'll resume the second segment. So we're gonna start
Yeah,
over and get the second
yeah,
segment after this. All
yeah,
right. Well, there you have it, folks. We are going to take a quick operational and production break. And when we have a video ready to go, we will start up the YouTube again and we'll have the second segment of our recording here. So
yeah,
I'm just going to pause the
yeah,
recording,
guys.
but I'm going to stop live stream and we'll start a new live stream for the second segment. Thank you.